following podcast contains spoilers. So this is Noob and Solo Talk Anime Podcast number 3. We're doing Erased. So just a basic intro. Erased, it's also known as The Town Where Only I Am Missing. It's an anime series based off the manga of the same name. It was done by A1 Pictures, and it originally aired from January 8th, 2016 to March 25th of 2016. And kind of just a general summary. So it's just about Satoru has a power called Revival. It sends him back in time when someone's about to die or get injured, and he can just kind of go back in time and save them. And the story here is just him going back 18 years, and he's trying to save 3 classmates who died in a childhood kidnap and murder situation. So kind of overall, I've already seen this anime. This is the first time that Noob here has seen it. So what were your kind of overall opinions on it?
Well, I was going into this, especially after your first recommendation being just awful. I was going into this expecting to hate it, but this is probably in my list of top 10 anime of all time. Not even joking.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair though, this is my first recommendation of something I've actually seen before. So, No Guns Life, that was just a blind. I wanted to check it out for the season, but definitely I don't think we should ever even bring it up again.
Yeah, but overall, I loved at the beginning, I was thinking, it's just gonna be because I didn't I know you had mentioned something about time travel, but I had totally forgotten about that by the time I started it. Because like I said, I just started it today. I watched it all the way through over the course of about 3 or 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But I was going into it, the way it started out, I was thinking it was just gonna be a regular slice of life anime about this dude who works as a pizza delivery man, and he's dealing with a midlife crisis and stuff, which is pretty much how it starts off. Which really appealed to me personally, because I know that feeling. I've gotten to that point in my life myself to where I feel like I haven't really accomplished much. I think everybody gets to that point, and that's where he's at the beginning of the series.
Yeah.
Which was a perfect setup for completely throwing you off of your whole preconception of what you think this anime is going to be. I went into it like I said, thinking it was going to be a slice of life, and then they threw in a murder. You're thinking, okay, it's about him, trying to prove his innocence and stuff. And then when you think that's what it's going to be about, they throw the time travel thing in where he's trying to prevent the murders of a bunch of other girls that he grew up with and stuff. And I overall, I thought every single plot twist, even the plot twist that you could see coming, because let's be real, I don't think anybody who got past episode 7 or 8 didn't know who the murderer was by that point.
Yeah, I mean,
it was pretty obvious, but it was still enjoyable.
When I originally watched it, I definitely had kind of vibes of who the killer was, but there was a part of me that I was thinking it could be anyone at a certain part of the show. I was thinking maybe even, remember his friend, the blonde-haired kid? I'm like, maybe this kid fucking did it. I was actually, in on that. But by the end of it, I mean, like you said, it comes pretty obvious, but it's still, even though it's kind of obvious.
Enjoyable to watch.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, even though it's obvious, you're not sure how he's gonna find out about it. The main character, Satoru, right? Satoru.
Yeah, Satoru.
Yeah, even though you kind of see this stuff coming, you're wondering when he's eventually gonna figure it out, and how much other people are gonna figure out about how he's figuring this stuff out and stuff. So overall, I from the time I got to episode 2 all the way to the end, it was just nonstop, one plot leading to another. It was never a moment of downtime where the story was trying to come up with filler just to fill a time slot. It's the whole time you're getting relevant plot points, and the plot is being filled in constantly. You're not really sitting there bored at any point watching.
Yeah, I mean, it's really engaging, and I understand how you could easily watch it in one setting. I mean, every episode, comparison to some other anime, it really makes you just want to continue watching the next episode. Some anime you can stop at any point, but this is one of the ones you just kind of want to keep diving in. There is kind of that stalled period in the midway point where he kind of goes back to the future for a little bit. I think that's kind of like the only like, you know, period where it kind of slows down a little bit.
And you know what? That kind of like that by itself kind of threw me for a loop too, because I was thinking when he went back to the like 18 years into the future, I was thinking, wait, maybe he's just gonna keep on going between the past and the future to like link all these threads together and figure out who it was, and that kind of sort of happened, but most of it happened in the past. Like the stuff that happened in the future was kind of like it was. I'm not gonna say it was irrelevant because that's the life that he grew up in, which will bring me into something I want to talk about later. But like a lot of the relevant plot happened while he was in the past and like as a kid and stuff. So like I said, everything about it was great. I think for me the best the only real plot twist that like you know, honestly, I can't say there is a plot twist that I just flat out didn't see. I mean, I see coming, but I mean, because I knew, like, you could tell, like, when you saw those bruises on what's that girl's name?
Which one?
Ko.
Yeah,
Yeah. When
Ko
you saw the
Kaio.
bruises, yeah, Kaio. When you saw like the bruises on her on her neck and on her leg and stuff, you knew. I mean, like you just knew that something was going on. That's something else too. Like I just keep on bringing up more and more stuff I love about this, but I'm not gonna say I loved it because this was happening. But I like how the anime treated real world like real world issues with like the amount of care that they did in this show. Like they went over like this anime not only just goes over like something like child abuse, kidnapping, like goes over like broken families, like it goes
Yeah.
over pedophilia, like this anime like it was hitting a lot of real world like issues. And like you would think throwing that in there with like a show about time travel, you're just kind of like pitting those real world issues on a back burner and just using them as like spice something to spice up your story. But
Yeah.
this show took the time to like really like do a mature take on a lot of those issues and like really put a lot of focus on these issues and like a real or like how like this can like how like stuff like kids not walking home by themselves and like stuff like like if you see like I think it had like even like some good I mean it had like some good lessons about how if you see kids like alone like at
Yeah,
school or
I mean,
whatever like
overall, it does a lot of things really, really good as far as kind of being a very mature themed show. I mean,
yeah.
even kind of getting into the main character a little bit, he starts off as like a manga writer, and that's kind of what he wanted to do, even though he was a pizza guy. His true passion was being a manga writer, and as you go through the series, you really learned like what he was inspired by was the older shonen manga that he used to read, kind of like just a lot of the shonen genre in general. And that really ties into this series nice because it takes the idea of those shonen like tropes of being a hero, like crazy like outlandish being a hero, and then it takes it to the actual adult side of things. Like how could you actually take those principles and apply them in a real life type of setting in an anime? And that's really what they do here, is rather than it be like a grandiose like battle, like you really see that in the final like episode where it's kind of recapping everything that happened and how he got to this point. And it really shows that he kind of lived that story of being a hero, but in like a more realistic way comparison to the high fiction and fantasy of a lot of shonen anime, which I really appreciated that take. And then at the end you learn that he becomes a successful manga creator. So
And that goes into something I said I wanted to get into later. I'm glad you brought it up. But like how he got to the point where at the end he was fulfilling his dream. It was like this was one thing this show did so much better than almost any anime I've seen. And I'm gonna be giving this show praise for the next hour because I really didn't find much wrong with it at all. Like I like at the beginning of the series when like like he like after he like stopped that truck from running over that kid and he ends up in hospital, that girl, I think her name was was it Aromi or
which one?
like the you don't even have her. Oh yeah, there, here he is.
The coworker?
Yeah,
Irie.
Irie,
Yeah,
Irie,
Irie. Yeah.
like when she came and visited him in the hospital, and like you remember, he asked, like, when she was saying, like, when he asked her, like, why do you work at this pizza place? Don't you have something else you want to do with your life? And she's like, I have a dream, like, or something. She was talking about how she has like life aspirations, stuff she wants to do, and then she was like, you're not gonna ask me what they were, and he's like, it doesn't even really matter. Does it even really matter?
Yeah.
And then she's like, you know what? I'm just not gonna tell you then. And so you don't like, and you know what? She doesn't tell him, and she never really tells him. You don't find out until the very last episode, and like literally the last 10 seconds of the last
Yeah.
episode, what that dream actually
So
was.
to kind of
So it was like
get to that,
bringing everything
did
like
you
around.
like that ending though? Where are you glad that she showed up at the ending there?
Yes,
Like, were
yes,
you waiting for that?
I was waiting for that, but I like how when she does show up at the end, everything comes full circle,
Yeah.
and he realizes, like, I mean, in a way, it was like, because he like this show took time travel, and I think they pulled a reverse Avengers with the time travel, and like, like, let's say in Endgame, that point where everybody disappears for however long they disappear after Thanos snaps, and then when everybody comes back,
Yeah.
they just they like come back at the same age they were when they got snapped away, so like they didn't lose any time. He lived for 29 years, so he was 29 years old for the entire show,
Yep.
but because, like, he goes back, like, in time to be a kid again, he was like reliving his childhood after living for 29 years at that point, so that the point where he does go into that coma for 15 years, it's basically like, it was since he doesn't have to live the next 15 years of his life. He says it to what's his name, that the murdered dude, I can't remember his name. Like, before,
Yashiro.
like, yeah, Yashiro.
Yeah.
He says, like, to him, he's like, "Oh, 15 years must have been an eternity for you. I was asleep the whole time, so went by for me in a second." So it's
Uh-huh.
basically him, like everybody else, catching up to him because he had already lived for 29 years at that point. So if he had like lived that 15 years, he would have been he would have lived for 45 years by the time he was 25.
Yeah.
So that 15 years in a coma was kind of a break for him, in the fact that everybody else. I mean, he had so much more. He had lived so much longer than everybody else by a point. It
Yeah. I
allowed
mean,
everybody else to mature up to the point where he was.
yeah.
So
Overall, he's like I really liked his character. Like, he does a
oh,
lot, like, comparison to a lot of shonen characters. Like, even from the beginning, he kind of, like you said, he was in a place, midlife crisis point of his life. But even going back in time, like, he kind of knew what his mission was, and even in the future, like, he would always do things that would risk himself. And over the course of the series, he's willing to take big sacrifices. He was willing to die to save them. He was willing to obviously go in a coma for 15 years, and he didn't even let that kind of ruin his character. He kind of just built off of that. Like you said, since he had already lived that, it kind of worked out for him almost, because he just got to accelerate. And I mean, I kind of feel bad for his mom having to deal with that for 15 years, but
but
that's the only character I feel like. But I mean,
yeah, I mean, honestly, like, it wasn't just his mom. All of his friends, like, because like you saw, like, like when his friend showed up to see him in the hospital after he had recovered from his coma and stuff, like, they felt like it was unfair to them that they got to live their life while he was in a coma, and it made a lot, like, he didn't feel any like he had missed anything, because by that point he had lived, like, up to the point where they were, like, he
yeah,
had the life, and like, him, and the fact that he didn't go all the way, like, to the point where he was at the start of the series means he gets a chance to do a lot of stuff over and do things differently than what he did before, because, which, helps him, like, by the time he gets to, like, that middle age, like, midlife point, he's not feeling as much regret. So it's like the show was, I think the main focus of the show was about him really discovering what he really missed in life, and, like, helping him move forward with what he wanted to do.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
there was a lot of things, just kind of like where he was in the future at the beginning of the show. His friends weren't really even around and in his life at that point, from what we saw, just kind of overall. He kind of was sort of a loner at a certain point. and he kind of had no direction. So it was nice to see that the changes that he made really inspired everyone around him to kind of be better people too. It kind of leads me to what do you think of Kaio's relationship and having the baby with the other guy? Like, were you a fan of that or?
Who like the thing is like because I'm gonna be honest, a lot of the names of the show were really Japanese, so
Yeah.
I wasn't sure who she ended up like getting with because they only mentioned them by name. Um, was it Let me like look at that real quick because
Uh-huh.
I wasn't even really sure like what had happened by that point. I was just sure that she had gotten with somebody else. I will say this much though. I was overall I wasn't dissatisfied with it. Um I think she like she like really like she I really wanted her to have the happy ending that she got for herself.
So do you do
So
you do you ship him with Irie over her then?
yes,
Even though
yes.
they
I
were
mean, like, yeah. I mean, honestly, I was thinking at first that maybe this thing between him and Kyle would be great, but
I
he
mean,
like,
I was
but
a little
think
off put
about
by
this.
it though. I was a little off put. I'm like, really? This bitch is gonna go and fuck his friend and have a baby while he's in a coma? I mean, I
Well, no,
guess.
think about this though. Think about
Uh,
this though. Like, he was like 29 by at the beginning of the series, right? And like at
yeah,
that point in the series, like he like at the point where because like remember he had lived like basically all of his life up to 29 by that point, and she was dead in the childhood that he remembered. So he didn't really know her for more than those like few weeks that he knew her as a kid when after he had went back. So
that's true.
he was like when you think about it, he was like a 29-year-old getting to know like her as a little girl.
Yeah, I know.
So
He even
like
says that multiple times. He's like, dude, you're 29. Stop like
yeah.
getting
So
into.
so from that point, yeah, like I can see why he really didn't feel like that connection with her to the point where he was upset about it. And for that reason, I think Irie got to know him like as like the adult that he grew like that he had grew up to become by that point. So, but the thing is, though, what's really kind of like upsetting about this is like when he sees Iria to the end, like he knows her like really well from like the time that they spent together before like his revival happened.
Yeah.
She doesn't remember anything from that timeline
But
at all. So it's like
I kind of like that though because it's not directly specific that they get together or he even wants to be with her, and I kind of like
I,
that.
yeah, they don't really like explicitly state that that they're a couple or anything, but it's pretty heavily implied.
Yeah, it's
So,
implied they might end up together after that, but
and it's pretty clear.
I like
It's
how they
pretty
had
clear
that
that
moment
he
though.
like it's pretty clear that he really wanted that. But the thing is, remember at the beginning of the series, he kind of like brushed it off because she was like 18 and he was 29, so it's like a 10-year gap, especially that early in life. See, it's kind of
Yeah,
excessive.
but
So,
he's
but the
but
thing
by
is,
the
by
end,
the end of it,
yeah.
he's like 25, and I'm thinking she's still like
No,
18.
no, no,
So,
no. There was another time skip at the end. It's 2010, so he's actually 4 years. He's actually 33, and she's 21 at in that scene.
yeah. So I think that at that point, like, yeah, maybe they have a chance at more of a real relationship and stuff.
Yeah, because she
You
was
know,
17 when he first met her, and that was a little weird. But 21
uh,
versus 17 is a pretty big
yeah.
difference.
I will say, I mean, this much though. Like, it seems like one thing, I mean, this like her character in general goes into another thing the show does really great, and is like this show is really good at taking the bare minimum amount of time to do the maximum amount of character development. She
Yeah.
didn't have a whole lot of like screen time throughout the entire show, yet you get to know a lot about her just from the little bit of time she's on screen. This show does not waste a single second of its runtime. Every single frame is meticulously put together to like either draw out the characters, draw out the relationships with other characters, like their
Yeah,
motivations,
there's
like
not much filler in this. I mean, even in comparison, I really liked Charlotte a lot, but even, the school days point with them, some of that could be considered kind of fillerish, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. I mean, and like this show, like it was not trying. I mean, this show was like a lot of other shows they'll take they have scenes where it's all about character development so that you have like a reference for what this character is like going into a certain scene, and then you go into that scene. This
Oh yeah.
show
By the
develops the
way,
characters while they're like running the scene. So like you're not getting moments where characters are going into exposition dumps describing something. Like a lot of the stuff in the show like is not even really told by the characters. It's like you figuring it out just by like watching it and like subtle clues in the scene. Like so if you watch for like just subtle clues in like the show and stuff, eventually you could figure out who the killer is before like like that's how I figured it out. It was
mm-hmm.
pretty obvious who the killer was by I'd say episode 9 when Kaio, she was like like they were like hiding her in that old bus. I guess that was an old bus or a trailer or something,
Yeah, it
right?
was an old bus. Yeah,
So
I thought that was really interesting though,
yeah,
because they kind of make it explicit who he is, but it's kind of like you're kind of in on it and you're waiting for
well, like
the main
it was
characters to
pretty
find out.
obvious. It was pretty obvious who it was when he goes and talks to his teacher, and his teacher asks, "Where were you hiding her?" I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, and then they explained that yeah, she was on the bus, and maybe at that point it wasn't like super specific, but then when all the evidence disappears from the bus, I'm like, who else did you tell this to? And like because the killer, well, for the killer to take all that stuff out of the bus, he knew somebody was onto him.
Yeah.
Who else would have had the idea that somebody was onto him other than the person you told like specifically where you were hiding her at? So and he even implies like when he it talks to him in that conversation like yeah that would be a great place to like for us like a kidnapper to hide a body or something like that. He basically like flat out gave himself away at that point.
Yeah, but I did like the interesting like points of that relationship that they have together. That kind of he looked up to him as like a father figure, sort of by the end of it, and that's why he didn't even want to try to look at him as a suspect for it. So that was interesting
Yeah.
that they kind of went that angle with it. What do you think? Because I do want to talk just kind of more about just his character, like
Yashiro.
Yashiro. What do you
Yeah.
think of his whole ending, like that whole ending scene with him?
Well,
Like he waited
before we get
15 years, he didn't
yeah,
want to kill
before we
him,
get to
or
that, like I think we get to, his character development because even though he was basically the main villain in the anime, he was also in like the main mentor to the mentor to the main character and the father figure, like you said. And
mm-hmm.
so he was he was a good guy until he wasn't, and it wasn't like it was like this heel turn or whatever. I mean, it's something that like I think most people would see coming, but in the moments where he like it wasn't super obvious, he was just genuinely like a really good character, and whether like yes he was a bad guy, but
Yeah, when he
because
saved like Kaio, that.
yeah, like when he saved Kyle, like you were like, I mean, like actually that when you said that, yeah, like even if you realized that there was one point where maybe you kind of thought it was somebody else, that was
Mm-hmm.
the point for me because I was like, yeah, he went through all this trouble to help save Kyle. Maybe I was wrong about
Yeah,
him.
because
Yeah,
because the show does it cleverly. A lot of
yeah,
like detective stories or investigating stories. They use the trope, the red herring trope, where they'll have a character that seems obviously like it is, like the actual murderer, but then there'll be a twist and it's someone else. I mean, there kind of was that twist where the name change, which I thought was a kind of little weird. That
the name change is kind of what threw me off. I was like, I mean, because I
yeah.
was thinking maybe there's somebody in the past with that name, and we're going to like be able to figure this out. But the name change, I think whether I mean like the name change, I think was great because it was something that you couldn't really see like in the show until he explained it, but everything else made sense and you were just waiting for that final clue to like really bring it all together, and it was the name
Yeah.
basically. But Yashiro as a character, I felt like he was really well developed, and he was something that was like pivotal to like every other character's lives pretty much. Like not only was he like a father figure to Satoru, you thought at one point maybe he was going to be like a relationship like slash romance for
Mm-hmm.
his mom,
Yeah.
even though that never came around. And then he was also like basically a mentor figure to a lot of the other boys in the show, and he was like kind of a savior along with Satoru to Kaio. So he was like, I think pitting him so central to like like every other character, and then like the twist about him, well, like where like what he really was it was a really big payoff for me. But like that 15 years later, where he like is having that final confrontation with Satoru at the hospital, um, I felt like at that point, I mean, yeah, like if you're not really into like the like that a whole like a psychological I mean, because I can't really describe how, I mean, the relationship between Yashiro and Satoru seems to be like I don't know, like a relationship like where like Yashiro like depended on Satoru just to give his life meaning.
Yeah.
And I mean, I like for to some extent, I like it kind of gives you a glimpse into the mind of somebody, like like with his level, with his type of psychosis. Like he um he needs somebody to like validate his existence, basically to give him meaning. Like
Well,
he
what do
got
you think of
meaning
that
out of.
whole backstory with the hamsters and the strings that connect you to heaven and hell? Like, what do you think of that whole anger, like that he kind of his philosophy is
Like
built off of?
honestly, like I didn't feel like that one particular thing string added anything to the story at all. Cause like I personally like he mentioned it once and then it just never was brought up again until you see the spider thread on top. But the thing is, the spider threads don't start to come up until like the last two episodes, and at that
Mm-hmm.
point, like the story's getting ready to conclude, and like the spider threads don't really link anything else within the show. At least it didn't for me. Maybe I missed something like a subtle clue in like earlier in the show, but I didn't really see like those threads or whatever being pivotal to the plot. I just thought it was something that they brought in like at the end just to give him some really cool dialogue, which that was
Well,
still some interesting dialogue. But
yeah.
ultimately, that hamster in a cage didn't mean much to me.
Well,
Like,
here's the thing. I kind of just want to go over this. I think this is a good point to talk about it. So, with this particular series, I've actually read the manga on this series. A very interesting thing about this series is it's one of the shows that we were mentioning is the ending is actually different in the manga than it is in the anime because the anime did air before the manga was completed. So it's actually very interesting because it's basically the same ending, but it's kind of in a different locale, and there's actually more time skips, and there's basically a complete alternative ending. And with that, there's also a Netflix adaptation, a live action adaptation of the series. But with the Netflix adaptation, it follows the manga exactly. So it's actually
that might be interesting. I might check out the Netflix
yeah,
series just to
so
see
it's
the
a
difference.
live action series, but it's based on the original manga ending, so it's more true to that. There also was a standalone movie which has a third ending. So there's actually three separate endings to this series that kind of exist between the manga ending, the anime ending, and then the live action movie ending.
Oh, have you seen the live action
I
series?
have I have not seen either of the live actions. I've read the manga, but I have not
Oh, you know
seen.
what? I actually I am not a huge fan of reading manga. I like to look at the
Mhm.
pictures, but I might actually read the manga for this because, like I said, I was this show I will put in my top 10 best anime of all
hmm
time. It was that good.
And
I was.
another thing, just kind of since I'm going over all of this right now, since I'm really into this show too. It's one of my favorites, definitely on my list. So there actually is a light novel which is about the court hearings of Yashiro, and it actually goes into more detail of his the reason he's a killer. So I have read parts of that. I haven't read the full thing. And then there's also a sequel. It's a Gaiden or an re manga, which actually deals with the lives of the side characters in between the time skip of while he's in a coma. So that's like an interesting read as well, and I have read that as well. So
Well,
just kind of to throw all that out there.
like I said, I really do love the show, but I do want to at least like go into some things about the show that I do have some criticism for, and it's mainly in the Satoru's some of his judgment in particular. Remember that he was 29 years old. At this point, you have a fairly decent amount of reasoning skills, and especially because
Mm-hmm.
he seemed to be like like more of like detective oriented. Like yeah, he was able to think like a detective quite a bit. So like my pretty much my only complaint is like some of the downright stupid decisions that he made. Like for instance, when he goes back in time, his whole focus is on saving Kyle, right?
Yeah.
And he keeps still thinking, okay, I saved Kyle, everything's gonna be resolved. Like, no, that murderer is still on the loose. You didn't catch the murderer, so if she doesn't die, somebody else will. Ultimately,
Yeah.
she ended up dying anyway. But I was thinking, even before she died again, I was thinking somebody else is gonna die. Like the only way you're going to stop this is to catch the killer. And he didn't seem to be
Yeah,
focused on that
he
more.
didn't
Like,
seem to care about finding who the killer
he
was
was like,
at
I'm just gonna
first.
save her and her alone. I'm like, there was like two or three other
And
people who died.
it's weird too because one of the other people who dies is one of his actual friends.
Yeah, I'm like, he was so focused on just saving her, he didn't care about finding the killer. And when the killer killed again, anyway, he was like I didn't really stop anything. I was like, oh yeah, it's like if you want to stop a problem, maybe you should stop the cause of the problem, not one of like the things that happens because of the problem. Like the problem was always the killer. If you
Yeah.
don't catch the killer is still able to kill. He may not
I
even kill fast.
I remember when the series first came out. That's actually one of the biggest complaints for some of the people that didn't like the show, is they felt like him back in time. He acted too much like a child, even though he's
I mean,
supposed to be an adult. But the thing is, I
maybe
don't know.
like because like the thing is he did go back into his child body, so like even
Yeah.
though he had all of his memories from his life, maybe he like since his brain wasn't fully developed, he wasn't able to think as
Yeah.
like
He still
at
had
the
those
level he was at.
reactions of a child
Yeah,
because he was in a child's body, even though he
yeah,
has the
because like there were
memories.
moments where like he'd be actually, I mean, maybe those moments were also happening as an adult. I can't remember, but like remember there was a lot of points when he was a kid where he would think something and he'd just be saying it like out loud without realizing it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Yeah.
that might happen as an adult too. I think he just
He
has some
he did
issues.
he did do that as an adult. Um,
Like,
I do like it was pretty clever that the entire time as he was a kid he was narrating as an adult, and I did like at the end when
yeah,
he
when he was
switched to
narrating
it.
as a kid. I
Yeah,
mean, like it shows that I think at that point, since like he went into a coma while he was still a kid, and he lost a lot of his memories because of it. Like up until he got his memories back, his last memory was of him being a kid. Like
yeah,
so at that point he was a kid, but I mean, I think you started to realize that he had his memories back when you started hearing him think like as an adult again and stuff.
yeah. And I think
Uh,
that was very clever the way they did that. So before we go to waifus, I just want to say, do you have any other
well, actually,
opinions about other side characters
I
or?
mean, I'd say before we get to that, there are
Hmm. I know
well, a few
there's
other
so
things.
much to talk about. What about even
I mean,
the
well,
June
one thing,
character too? We haven't really talked about him at all. Like he was
uh,
the true red herring.
yeah, I mean, I felt like him as like that red herring was a great a great wrench to throw into the conceptions of what you're thinking when you're watching the show.
Hmm.
You're thinking, hey, like this guy that he trusted was like a killer and stuff, and you kind of, I mean, you already realize by the time he revives back into his kid's body that this dude didn't do it because his mom came to that conclusion already.
Yeah.
But you're thinking maybe it was his father then, and like he really wasn't
Hmm.
just covering for his dad, or
I did.
maybe
I liked
somehow
him as
he
a
was still
character,
involved.
though. I kind of like that angle where they kind of tackle, how adults can't do anything for kids in modern society because it's really
I
frowned
mean,
upon.
that goes in I'm glad you brought it up because that goes into something that I thought we should talk a little bit more about because it's one thing the show does really well is it brings in like issues that we deal with in the real world, like stuff like like say him and his awkwardness and his stutter and the fact that he would just be at the park and playing with kids and stuff. Like it goes into the point where you realize that the type of character he is, and that he was basically more or less just completely innocent. And he was just
Hmm.
out there because he just didn't have anything else to do. It goes into like where we are at as a society now as compared to like maybe
Yeah.
30. I mean, because like think about that.
Well, I
Like
mean,
he
it
went
was
back
in
to like 19.
88.
Yeah, it
88,
was in
yeah.
88, but like he was like at the point where you realize that hey, this guy is harmless. He's just throwing an airplane at a park.
Well,
And
I really
uh
like the parallel scene when Satoru is an adult and he helps the kids with the plan, and then he
yeah.
gets ridiculed for it. I did that.
I
Think
mean,
that was a nice
I like
parallel.
that too because it helped him to really uh feel what June went through, and like it gave you more sympathy for June, and gave Satoru more understanding of June's character and where he was at because of all the stuff that happened to him.
Yeah,
because
and
like
in the
these.
manga, they actually they expand on what June's ending is. So he basically finds a wife. He like travels and finds a wife and comes back with her. You actually see them at the end. I don't know if you missed that or not, but he actually ends up with
Yeah,
a
like
wife and a kid.
I saw that at the end. I was pretty happy for that too. Overall, like I like every single character in the show, even the minor characters are I thought were all really well developed, and like it like you overall like you feel a lot of sympathy for all the characters in this show. And I liked how they handled, like I said, like the awkwardness of June, like I liked how they handled the midlife crisis that Satoru was going through at the beginning. Because, like I said, I relate heavily to that alone. That whole like starting off with that plot point probably made the show like something that I was more invested in. It's probably why I related to him as a character a lot more, is because like when you go through that point, like because a lot of people, they get out of high school, they have all these dreams about what they're gonna do with their life, and then by the time you hit like 30 and you're like living paycheck to paycheck, and you really haven't accomplished anything you wanted to do, you kind of like say, did well, what was the point of my life? And like, did I, or why is it that like everybody else is able to accomplish this and I haven't done anything yet?
Yeah, and
And
I haven't got to 30 yet, but I definitely feel wasting years doing something that's not really progressing your dreams.
yeah. I mean, I think
Did a lot of
like a
that.
lot of people relate to that, and like for them to make that like a focal point at the beginning of like Satoru's character gives his character like a lot more depth than like a lot of other like characters, main characters in anime have. And then when they were going over other stuff too, like I said, when they go back in time and they go over like the feelings of isolation, like the feelings of the isolation that Kaio felt, that the feeling of isolation that other, I can't remember the other girl's name, but you know
What
the other
other girl?
girl, that other girl who like blamed Kaio for stealing that money, the lunch money or whatever.
Misato.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like and how she felt isolated after everybody like basically thought that she did it and tried to frame Kaio for it or something.
Hmm.
And then like how like before he even went back in time, remember like he didn't have memories of really having really close friends before he went back and actually became friends with these people. So it overall, I thought that there was a deeper lesson in all of that on how like you know like how like we should try to like get to know people a little bit better, basically. And especially I think is really a great, I mean, it's a great anime like for people like my age who are going watching this and going through that midlife crisis and trying to figure out, hey, maybe it's not too late to really do what we want to do with our lives. But also a really great like lesson for people like still in school or whatever,
Yeah.
and saying,
I mean,
hey,
it
like
really makes you think.
you're like,
It's like,
if you want to get out of this isolation, just go talk to
yeah, it
somebody.
makes you think like when you were a kid, maybe because there's always people like that, or you might have been like that. So it's like, what a difference it could have made in a person's life if you actually just talk to them.
Yeah.
It's a really
And
powerful message there, and it actually saves their lives, and just that overall theme of it's really heavily implied about believing in each other. Having that support
yeah,
group.
and like he that goes into like really heavily what, I mean, he basically flat out says it like at the end, like in when he was like watching that one superhero his favorite superhero show, like that superhero like originally went into this like fight by himself and he lost, like was losing, but then he made friends and he started to count on those friends,
Yeah,
and
and
he
that's
was
why
able.
I think it's honestly I don't want to skip ahead to best moments and aspects, but that's literally probably one of my favorite parts is just that connection to obviously that shonen story, but then taking it and making it like a real lesson, like in a real life,
Yeah.
more realistic situation. I really like that whole idea is that he was a kid that grew up like a lot of kids, maybe inspired by heroes, and he kind of, rather than this be like another anime where he is a hero, he is like, he does have a power, but he's not
Yeah, I
like,
mean, like, the thing is, like, his power, like, ultimately, like, he was able to save, like, those people because he made friends and he was able to count on those friends. Like, like, it wasn't him saving, like, everybody by himself. He was only able to save Kaio and only able to save the other people because he like, he started to rely on people like Kenya, on, like, the other friends he had made. And they started, like, as they became closer, they became safer. Like,
yeah.
Because like really what like endangered all the girls originally was the fact that they were isolated, so they were easy targets for Yashiro. So I mean, and that goes into like real world lessons that I think a lot of like teachers need to be telling kids at school. Like, hey, don't be going places by yourself, especially don't be hanging out at parks alone by yourself.
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
that's not a good idea. But it also goes like to like really, I mean, like especially with Kaio's story. Hey, if you see signs of abuse, let somebody know.
Yeah,
Uh,
I really like that moment with man, what's the blonde haired kid's name? Kenya.
Kenya.
I like that moment where he's like, I noticed her was being beat, but I just didn't think it was any of my business, and like I couldn't do anything, and he was
Yeah,
really inspired that, he actually saw him stand up and do something about it. Otherwise,
totally.
she would have been killed, and that's kind of like the reality, like with child abuse in general. Like, there's a lot of situations like that really do go on, and
And it
no
wasn't
one
even
stops
it
it.
wasn't even just child abuse. Like the I think the like the at the end of Kaio's arc before she goes to live with her grandmother, you see that her mother was going through like like domestic abuse like in her like previous relationship too,
Yeah,
and
and
that
it's
that
implied
went
with her
on for
current relationship too. I
yeah.
mean,
Yeah, so like the thing is like and it goes to show you that hey, like like bro, like like people don't like her mom didn't just become a terrible mom
yeah,
overnight. It
because
was
you really
because
hate her character, but like,
yeah, but you really start to really kind of empathize with her character, like when you see like what she went through and how her mother abandoned her. So it didn't make the grandmother seem like overall like the hero of the story when she came in to save Kyle. It
mhm.
made the grandmother seem like I could have prevented this in the first place if I had been
if
more
yeah,
understanding of
if
what was
she
going on with my
believed in it,
daughter.
or if she supported her, it's that same
Yeah,
theme throughout the show. Is just kind of
like
believing in people in your life and being there for them, and not just
yeah,
kind of
so
betraying them or leaving them. I mean, that's kind of what the whole theme is, I'd say.
I like even with the time travel in there, this story told like the story told in this anime was I feel like a real world story that I could see with real people going through. I didn't feel like any of these characters were anime characters. They felt like real characters to me. Like they felt like people I could have known. So
Yeah.
like I didn't feel like at any point any character in this anime was filling a trope or like like was like acting a certain way just because that's
Well,
typical of that type of
I
character.
didn't like Hermomi, or the boy who looked like a girl. That's literally my least favorite anime trope ever, and I
Well,
fucking hate it. And I hate that he's the one that she ends up with. Like that. That's what really pissed me off. That she ended up with him of all people.
honestly though,
Because you talked
you know
about who
what?
Kaio ended up with. She ended up with that fucking loser.
Oh,
Come on.
yeah, all right. So yeah, like I, at first I thought that maybe that character was like
It's my least favorite character. I hate that character. I just hate
but
that trope. It's the worst trope. Well, why does that trope exist? Tell me. Validate that tranny fucking shit to me. And I'm sorry, I really am not against it, like tranny people, but why did we have to have this character in the anime?
I don't like I feel like yeah like yeah I knew I mean I knew boys like that when I was younger and stuff.
You knew
And
a
it's like
boy that was
sometimes
like a girl? I used to have
I
long
know
hair
no
too, but I mean, I
I
didn't
like
act like that. Like
boys that were like like I remember when I was younger and I was in school,
But
maybe
he
not in
but he
elementary
ends
school,
up
but
being like
definitely
a
in middle
regular
school and
guy when he
stuff.
grew up. Maybe if they took
Yeah, I
it.
mean, like for like a lot of people, like they like what they were like when they were younger doesn't really represent what they become. Like
Yeah.
I've seen people who were like really feminine when they were like younger, like grow up to be really masculine, and like the opposite's true also. So it's like I mean, cause like I remember people from middle school and elementary school, I would meet them like 20 years later, and like they'd be like the exact opposite of what I remember them as. And it's because like you don't. I mean, I think a lot of people like they go through like a turning point in their life, like from like 18 to like 24, where it's like they it's like they first get out in the real world and like they're really still discovering a lot of stuff about themselves and like really are the first time outside of like getting to experience like learn stuff lessons outside of what their parents or their teachers would teach them or like what they would learn from their friends who were basically being influenced by all their parents, but people getting out and like seeing stuff for themselves, like learning their own lessons and stuff. So like when a lot of people get out in the real world and they they start to learn a lot about like the world outside of the bubble they grew up in. It starts to really influence the way they think of themselves.
Yeah.
So for that alone, I don't think that he was like really a like a poorly written character or anything. I just feel like he was
I'm just mad
more or
that
less
I'm
misunderstood
just mad
character.
he ended up with Kaio.
I'm not. I didn't foresee him ending up with Kyle of all people, but that is. I thought that she was going to end up with Kenya. I'm gonna be honest with you. That made more sense. But because like you saw, like Kenya did seem to like like her when they were
yeah,
younger and
I would
stuff.
still I would have shipped that more, to be honest.
Yeah, but I do think that like her ending up with Satoru was like probably not gonna happen because like I said, he was like he wasn't a kid. He was a kid, but he was a kid who had lived
And
29
then
years by that
the
point. So
glasses kid, like he didn't do anything the whole show. He's like the only kid who did absolutely nothing.
yeah, like
Like even the spiky haired kid, he at least had like a he's like a
he had
gung ho. He's the one who got her to talk to him, and then he like
that Aya girl.
well that, and he's the one who like initiate. He talks to Caillou for him at the beginning, remember, and kind of gets them
Yeah.
to talk to the first place, and then he ends up dating the other chick that was also murdered. She was just kind of. We didn't really get too much on her either, Misato. But
I mean, honestly, you don't really ever get to find out much about her. Like, I think the main thing about her, seeing how like the bully one day can become the bully the next day. So like she was like really like she was like a bully to Kyle and like was
yeah.
going like Kyle even mentioned how she invited her to a Christmas party just to show off how much money she had and stuff.
Yeah, that was a
Um,
dick move. I did like
so
the
like
Christmas tree
but,
scene though. That was
but the
nice.
thing is, though, even like like as terrible as she was, when she was on the other foot and she was the one being bullied, you did sympathize with her. Like
Mm-hmm.
you didn't feel like you didn't feel like it like just because like she was a bully, you didn't feel like she deserved to be bullied. And I think that's I think I ended up feeling that way because the show did a good job of making these characters more than just tropes. They really took the time to like give these characters like realistic personalities. They made
Yeah.
these characters people.
Yeah, and
Um,
I do like how she like raised charity for him and stuff like that when he went in the coma. She's
yeah,
like that was really nice to see that
yeah.
too.
So like and it shows how like the people like when you're younger are not goes back to what I said like earlier like somebody I knew in middle school isn't gonna be the same today. Like they've gone through a lot of stuff since then and like they've matured a lot. A lot of people act like like I remember when I was really young and I was in school, I would I would act a certain way to just impress people. I mean, you don't want, like, especially if you're like a super nerd, like you're probably into stuff that like most people wouldn't be into. You really want to like
Yeah,
act like
remember?
somebody else
Do you
just to
remember the
fit in.
scene at the beginning where they were talking about the video games they were playing? Like
Yeah.
the one kid was talking about playing Dragon Quest, and he was like hating on the other kids because one guy played Final Fantasy and then the other guy played something else, and he's like, "We all need to play the one game or whatever." That was cool.
Yeah.
I like
I
that
mean, so
moment.
like, and like I guess like one more like one relationship I do really want to like just mention a lot because it was so well developed and she ended up becoming like my one of my favorite characters in the show. Satoru's mom.
Yeah.
Holy crap! Everybody wishes they had a mom like that. She was just super understanding of every issue that he had. She was super aware of how he was feeling, even when he didn't realize it. Like she was always like it shows it. Like I think she was more of a realistic depiction of a mother who has been through some stuff than what you see in most other anime. And the
Yeah.
fact that
She's probably the
she was a
realest mother in an anime I've ever seen. Like,
because like when you see moms who are like totally like clueless on what their kids are doing, you're like thinking like did I mean like especially if you have like I think if you're a parent who has a kid like Satoru who like is constantly going out of his way to help people and put himself on the line for other people and stuff, it's probably because you raised them like that. And if you had raised them to be that kind of a person, you're probably that kind of person yourself and can relate to like what your kid's going through. And that shows in her better than any anime parent I've seen ever. So, uh,
yeah.
like she's I can't think of a single mom in any other anime that
No.
I felt was like more of a like a more of a realistic depiction of a mother than she was, and that's not because she was. And yeah, she was super awesome mom, and like, everybody should wish they had a mom like that. But it's also because she
Well, the
she
thing
like
I see in a
she
lot of anime is they do kind of like the over loving mother trope type of thing, where it's kind of like their mother just spoils them and they're like a mommy's boy type of thing, which you get a little bit of that in this, but she's still more realistic and down to earth, and she
yeah.
just takes care of her kid, and she like knows what's going on, and she still goes to work and does her thing, and she's still doing things, but she's just in his life, you know.
Yeah, and also, like, even when they didn't specifically say it, because like I said, one thing the show does is like it does a better job of showing than telling. Like you see like how her life drastically changed after Satoru went into a coma. Uh like like she was a reporter before that, and then she basically gives that life up, goes works at a convenience store, and then spends her entire like all of her free time just focused on taking care of her son.
Yeah, and it ends up
And
working out too, which is pretty
yeah,
awesome.
so like her like I feel like like I'm hoping like like if anybody who's watched this leaves this with one thing, is that she was like the most under I think
Well,
she's probably
I
one of the
think
most
it
underrated characters in anime I've seen
I
in a
think
while.
it
Like
goes to that idea of belief, though, because when they're telling a story about believing in people, who's going to believe in you the most but your mother? So she kind of is the character that like exists off that ideal of believing, and like she never even questions it. Like doesn't matter what timeline she is in, doesn't matter if it's the past or future. She's always there supporting him, always believing in him. Like, and it kind of pays off in that moment when he like brings her home and they have that whole confrontation about with CPS and all that. She actually goes out of her way to do that.
and it's like
Pretty awesome.
it also like like yeah everything about her as a character I thought was just great. So I
Well,
felt like
even years later, the reason she got murdered and started the series is because she was
because
looking into it
she
still.
yeah, and it shows something too, like she like because remember she was like going through that like like was more worried about like the fact that she didn't believe Satoru. I'm probably pronounced his name wrong a billion times.
It's
Anybody who's watching
fine.
this, sorry, but like she was so upset that she didn't believe him when he first told her that June didn't do it.
Yeah.
Like, and she was I think she was more going through the guilt over that than she was worried about the fact
But
that
the thing is, even though she didn't initially believe him, the fact that she decided to try to look into it more and finally by the end of it, it just shows that she decided to believe in him even at the end, which was really nice. And then
uh,
yeah, I mean that was pretty awesome.
So, yeah, I mean, so like overall though, like I feel like every single character in this show that got that the that was focused on in the show at least.
Well, I mean,
I'm
just
gonna say
look at how
the
much
glasses dude.
characters
I
we
will
could
say
talk.
this much. Like, yeah, the glasses dude is probably the only character I can think of that like what did he do? But
Yeah, he was just kind of there.
he was there, and
He's
like
the
you could have
character
taken him
that's
out of
there.
every scene he was in, and it wouldn't have mattered. But it doesn't matter because the show. I mean,
Um,
for that if that's the biggest gripe we have with the
well,
show,
we almost
the show
talked
is
about.
phenomenal.
It's kind of amazing though. This is the amount of side characters we've talked about in this show. Like we've talked about so many characters. Since we're pretty much almost talked about every character, what do you think about the pizza delivery guy, the
Oh,
manager
like
guy?
the manager?
You think he was a dick?
Yeah, he was. And you know what?
Yeah.
Like not no, like he was. You could tell that like a lot of what he did because
He
he
wanted to
just.
fuck that chick. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, he obviously had feelings for Irie and stuff, but like I just it wasn't really like he like I don't think he was like full blown in love. I think it was more like yeah, like you said, he just wanted to fuck her.
Yeah.
Because you didn't he was like he was more of a like like I mean especially like the type of guy who could use the abuse the trust of somebody like Satoru, that he probably knew like enough about the guy by that point to know that he didn't do it. And then the fact that he would just flat out lie to Irie's face to get the opportunity to call the police on Satoru,
So
just goes to
here's
show
a
you that
question
he's.
for you though.
Mm,
How do you think that Yashiro found out about his mom looking into, like, find out who he was? Like, how do you think he
no,
figured
no,
that out?
Oh no, I think Yashiro realized that his mom probably recognized him from when they were in that shopping area, and he was about to abduct that one girl.
Yeah.
So,
But
uh,
here's the interesting thing though, because it's kind of that's the part that's kind of confusing, and I want to just kind of do the parallel with the manga. I don't know. Do you want me to spoil the manga for you, or
yeah, go ahead.
so?
I'll still read it regardless.
Yeah. So anyone who's listening to this, I'm just going to spoil a portion of the manga, so just keep that in mind. Basically, the biggest difference between the manga and the anime, besides the ending portion being a little different, is the fact that in the anime it is stated that he has not killed another kid sent in that 15-year time skip. But in the original manga, he had actually killed between like 15 to 30 girls in that time period. So he never stopped killing girls during that coma period in the manga. And then the thing is, at the beginning of the anime, it's implied with that abduction of the girl that he was still killing in that original timeline, and there was reports of other murders after that. So I think it was very interesting that the anime chose. Obviously, it didn't have the manga source material, but they made it where he chose not to kill anyone for 15 years.
Yeah, I think
So,
the anime was just really like I think the anime, especially
well, I
considering
mean,
how
do you
dark it
think
was
that
at
was a
the point, they just
mistake though, as far as like, or because I mean, it
um.
kind of makes it because
I mean,
the ending
honestly,
of the manga is
I
much darker when you think about, well, while he was in the coma, the killings were still going on. So
well, no, I think yeah, I think it's like two different types of psychosis you're dealing with between the manga and anime. Because like for him, like after such in the anime, like Toru goes into the coma, his whole focal point became on Satoru to the point where like he would go and visit him in the hospital and like would shave him and like he was like his whole life became on like Satoru and like like the fact that he had caught him when like he thought he had like like had all of his like T's crossed and stuff. And, like he thought he had done like everything perfectly, and for him to get one upped by this kid became like basically this one thing that became his new obsession. Like his new obsession went from killing little girls to like Satoru, and
yeah,
so like yeah, that whole time that he was in a coma, it was like driving him. It was driving Yashiro nuts, and it was like I mean, he was probably like restless, wasn't able to sleep a lot, and just because think about it, somebody like him, like 15 years later, and I think the whole reason he even like like started helping out that one girl, like what was her name, the other girl that was in the hospital, I can't remember.
um, uh,
I can't.
let me tell you, I'll find it. It is Kumi.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
like I think the whole reason he started visiting her and helping her, it was just so it gave him an excuse to be close to Satoru. Like so it was like it wasn't that he had, like it had become like a good guy or
Well,
anything. It was that
since we're
he
bearing
got a new
manga
obsession.
spoilers, I kind of want to just kind of go over another part of it, just about his character in the manga versus the anime. In the manga and the light novel, they actually expand on it a little bit more. So it isn't heavily implied and basically outright said that he actually killed his original fiance, and that's actually what started his murders. Which we get the context, the story of the fiance, that it didn't work out, but it goes into more detail that he actually killed her, and then it ties into the whole hamster story and the strings, because the strings are basically like ties to heaven or hell, right? So like in his psychosis, like when he would see people that had strings, he wanted to basically kill them to cut them from the string. So like in the final scene when he wants to like kill himself, what he's trying to do is separate the string together with Satoru, and then both go to heaven together. That's like his whole mindset at the end there. But the scene plays out a little differently. It's actually years later. It's about there's like another time skip in the manga, so it's like years later, and it's in a different environment. It's at like a camp instead of a hospital on like a bridge type of thing. So I mean, it's a whole different angle, like for the ending. It's very interesting to kind of compare the two.
I mean, like honestly though, I like since I haven't read the manga and all thing I have is the anime to go on, I don't feel like I was really I like even hearing that now, I don't feel like not getting that in the anime was like causing me to miss anything, because I felt like
Mm-hmm.
everything they gave you enough in the anime to fill in all the details of what you're really curious about.
Yeah.
Like,
And
there's like
that's why
little
I'm
smaller details in
actually
there, but
very interested in checking out the Netflix adaptation, even though it's live action, just because it
yeah,
does follow the manga, so it's gonna have
I'm
that manga
interested in
ending.
I'm interested in checking out that Netflix adaptation. But let's be real, Netflix live action adaptations generally suck. Uh,
Oh yeah, and
uh,
I believe I haven't seen the live action movie, but from what I understand, I could be completely wrong. I believe the ending of that is that Satoru actually dies in that story. I'm not sure the exact concept. What's the word? Context of which he dies. I think he like dies kind of taking out the killer. So it's like a completely separate ending, which I think is interesting too, just to kind of compare. But
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to see that ending though, because
well,
the thing is, like, he a lot to get. I mean, he didn't even get like necessarily what I like most people would consider. I consider it a happy ending, but like some people, like, it would have been greater if he could have just saved everybody and then, like, not been in coma for
well,
15 years. But I thought that everything that
yeah.
happened was great, and I like sometimes, yeah, like in a dark story, you like, you feel like, like having a good ending is like a cop out, but I didn't feel that in this case. I was like wanting this character to get some payback from all the stuff that he had gone through over the course of the show. So
Mm-hmm.
I was completely satisfied with the ending of this anime,
And
and
that's kind of what the reason I brought up all of that other stuff is basically just to say that even though I've been exposed to the other mediums that the story has been told, I still think even though I haven't seen the live action stuff, I don't think it's gonna ever top this anime. I really just think it's very well done. I mean, the manga is definitely something that if you read manga, I think it's worth reading. But and if you kind of want to see the differences in certain things and you want to kind of have that, slower storytelling rather than fast pace. But I feel like that's why the anime works really well because it is constantly, going through the story and it actually meets all the steps needed to complete the story here, and it's just overall, I mean, really good. Do you want to go into the waifus now, since we pretty much,
yeah,
I mean,
we've already been talking for an hour. We haven't even hit that yet.
yeah, I mean, we kind of gone over it.
I mean, like, the thing is, I could talk about this show for another hour.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to say. I mean, I think we touched on a lot of the themes. We kind of went over all the
I mean,
characters
like,
there.
I
So,
feel like we could have gone a lot more in depth onto each one of those themes that we've already talked
and
about too. Because,
we can definitely talk
honestly,
about more once we get the best moments and aspects. We can tie it in. But for now, I
yeah,
think let's just talk about the waifus. So for the waifus, I picked this list of 6, which actually on the stream now I have actual pictures of the characters here, kind of like it's in the document. So, what do you think though? Who's the waifu? And we're talking about the adult versions of the characters, obviously, not the kid versions. Like
well,
basically,
like,
who is
so,
your overall waifu? Like, who would you want to end up with? Like, who'd you
you
like
know
the
what?
best?
Overall, I would say, like, for me, it's kind of a tie between his mom and Irie. Um, for different reasons. Like, I felt like his mom was like just overall just a really well-rounded character, or great, like, great female protagonist when she was like in the protagonist role, like a great supporting character when she was like acting as the supporting character.
Yeah,
Irie, for basically the same reasons. She was like, even though she wasn't on screen that long, I feel like her, like, the few like lines that she dialogue she had in the first few episodes was basically the main thing motivating Satoru throughout the entire series. Like, he would always think back to something that she had said to him, and so for her to be as influential without even being on screen that long, I would pit her up there as well. So I'm gonna say it's a tie between those two.
yeah. I think for me, it's definitely either Irie or Kaio. Um, I mean, I like the mom character, but obviously she's just not waifu material for me. She smokes. I mean, that's just a turn
I mean,
off.
like, yeah, like the smoking thing. I'm not a smokers either, but if you take like She's only smoked in
I
like two
also
episodes
I
the
also
entire
do not
show.
like her lips. I think the lips were kind of a little too
No, no,
much.
the Angelina
No,
Jolie
the
type
lips were a
lips,
little
like
too much, man. Of all the anime characters, her lips are just out of control in this. Like oh yeah, one thing I wanted to mention here. I actually watched the first episode of this with Becca, my girlfriend. I kind of wanted to see if she wanted to watch it with me, but she didn't want to watch it after the first episode, and it was mainly because of the lips. She said it was ugly and didn't want to continue.
that's BS. So,
Well, I'm just saying that was one of her excuses of why. 'Cause, she just didn't want to continue it with me, which was
I
kind of
mean,
sad.
like if we were just going on overall looks, I think Irie beats everybody hands down.
Yeah,
But
Irie, I mean, she's a great character. Kind of to the manga too, since we've been talking about it. There's actually the beginning. She has a little more backstory. She actually helps save someone's life at the beginning of the manga. So there's like more of a connection with him and his power with her at the beginning. So there's just a little more building of their relationship, which I appreciated. Which I think that's kind of a thing with the anime. It focuses a lot on Kaio or Ko, or I don't even know how to say her name. But it focuses heavily on her, like as like the main character, sort of,
yeah.
for at least the majority of the show.
Well, yeah. I mean, one other thing though, like that I would like to address before we get into our overall impressions, because it kind of does tie
You
into
mean the
the
best
last
moments
week.
and aspects?
Well, before we even get to the best moments and aspects, I would like to just basically, since we've done like 2 weeks in a row in anime that like involve time travel in some form or another,
Mm-hmm.
which one do you think handled the time travel like mechanic better, Erased or Charlotte?
Hmm. That's tough because that's definitely something I wanted to talk about. I mean, watching Charlotte actually inspired me to kind of watch this just because it's something I hadn't seen in a long time, and I kind of wanted to. It was actually really good rewatching too. This is probably the third time I've watched the series, but
I mean, they both handle like the both shows handle time travel basically like similar ways where like the character can jump into his body in a previous time and stuff. But
yeah,
like I mean, it's
I
like
mean
like it was
overall
a lot
for me,
overpowered in this, and it felt like more like something like ReZero, where like the character doesn't have any control over what moment he goes back to or when he goes back to it.
yeah.
So you're wondering like who's really in control of like when he goes back? Like, is it just fate that determines it, or is it God or something like that,
Well,
or like
that's kind of what I wanted to talk about since we're bringing this up. I do think this interpretation is a little bit more better, like better just in general to me, just because I like time travel as an act of like kind of like universal cosmic interference type of thing, or like an act of God, versus just it being like the most broken, overpowered power that someone just magically gets, even though it doesn't fit in line with the actual mutations of human. At least I'm just saying, if a character gets full time travel in My Hero Academia, I'm signing out. So, because I know there's a little bit of time
Mandalorian's probably gonna get it.
I'm just saying,
Getting every other
like
power.
time manipulation's one thing, but when you're talking about like actually going back in time and changing the course of history, that's where I have a problem. And I feel like this show, which you haven't played Life is Strange, right? One thing about the show, it really is very super duper 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 similar to Life is Strange, which is a story based video game that Square Enix published. And that game is basically, let me tell you how similar that show is. Like, people actually think it's this shows that they ripped off each other, which this came first, but Life is Strange literally has the blue butterfly, right? So the character sees a blue butterfly, and then they get the ability to travel back in time, and the whole story is about them preventing their friend from dying. That's literally the story of Life is Strange. And it has the blue butterfly motif. And
I think the butterfly is like kind of a reference to the butterfly effect.
Yeah, and that's just kind of like a idea in time travel in general. And that's what I like about that interpretation of time travel versus like if it's a machine or if it's a power. I like it being kind of an act of God or nature. And in this, it's kind of implied that maybe through circumstance that he just, I don't know why he got this power. Maybe it was because of the trauma that he had in the past, and that the past was kind of reawakening. We really don't dive into details about how long he's had this power. I mean, it's implied that
Well, like it
he
seems
had.
yeah, it seems more you've seen the Butterfly Effect movie, right, with Ashton Kutcher.
Yeah.
It seems a lot more like that when you think about it, because like you remember, like at the beginning when his mom comes and stays with him, she talks about something that happened in his past that he didn't have any memory of until she brought it up to him. It
Well,
kind of similar to what his
that's the concept of like that's one of the reasons that the title Erased. That's kind of why it's called Erased in the English translation, because it kind of fits there. Um,
Yeah, but
the idea of his
it seems like
memories being
like the fact that
erased.
he didn't completely remember it means that like it was like a point. It was like basically like a checkpoint in his life where like something happened, but he has to go back in and decide what. So it's like his whole life up to that point is like a visual novel that hasn't been played yet. So
Hmm.
and he can go back and make those decisions at certain points, because like he doesn't ever go back to the same point. Even when he goes back to the past, like the two or three times he goes back to the past, he doesn't ever go back to the past at the exact same point. Like he shows up back in the past the first time and he's like in his classroom, and then the second time he goes back, he's at that science museum in front of that bear and stuff.
Yeah. And
So
I think for me, that's also a thing with time travel. I do like the idea of like not being able to control it. I think controlled time travel is a little bit more broken and it leads to more problems in storytelling if the character kind of willfully controls it. So the fact that he kind of doesn't have control over it, I mean, it kind of lets him do it when he really needs it the most in certain situations. But I feel like it's not like just his power, it's kind of like an act of nature that he just is connected to. It's not necessarily him doing it, you know what I mean? Like he doesn't have control over it, which I really appreciated that versus Charlotte or pretty much any other series where there's a character that controls time, because I feel like that's a little too broken if you can just decide to go back in time.
nah, time travel's not broken. It's
Uh,
basically the most like overrated power ever. Like, oh my goodness, you can go back in time and kill me before I was even born.
yeah,
Whoopie doo.
that's not
Like,
broken. No. You can create you can actually create dimensions based on like split paths or whatever. Like I don't know. It's a little too much if you think about it like that, but so, well, I mean, I guess we about covered that. And do you have anything else to say on waifus before we go fully into best moments and aspects or
no, I think we can go into like best moments.
okay.
You want to go first? You want me?
Yeah, I'll go first. So, my very best moment is probably the end scene where he's finally reading his letter that he foreshadowed the whole time. And then it actually reveals, because the original Japanese title for this is "The Town Where I'm the Only One Missing," and originally that's something that Caillou says, and you think it's like her, reading of the town that she was the one missing, but at the end it turned out it was him missing for 15 years, and that was the town was missing him and everything moved on. And I really thought that was pretty much the best moment, how her story tied in with his story. And that was very, very well done. I mean, I couldn't see it any better than that. So that's my favorite moment for sure.
Well, I feel like this is a cop out because that was also my favorite moment.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I think anybody who watches the show all the way through is probably gonna feel a great bit of impact from that moment. My
Hmm.
favorite reason why that was my favorite moment was because, like going along with the theme of time travel and this the linearity of like the way we view timelines and stuff. This part of it kind of brought like everything in the show full circle, and it feels like it was a part where all the different like possible timelines throughout the show kind of converge onto this one point
Yeah.
where this was like it was at the same point underneath the bridge where he like comes to the point where he realizes that he needed to trust other people, and he says that to her, uh that I'm glad I met you, and like I'm going to like he realizes he's going to start he needs to start trusting more people, and that's when he forces himself to go back that one last time, which leads everything back to this point. Like I think everything kind
Yeah.
of gets summed up into that one scene.
And then
where
obviously,
like
Irie comes out at the very, very end, and that was just kind of full closure, like you said, like we
yeah
talked about at the beginning, and it was just very
like,
well done. Like
yeah. I mean, yeah, 'cause,
it's
like
almost,
everything.
it's almost so well done that I don't even really care what happened in the middle of the story, if as long as it ended like that.
I mean, like yeah, like
I don't know. It's a really good ending, I think.
and the end, like the ending, the ending. I feel like the ending. Every moment in this anime, in particular, ties into every other moment somehow. This isn't an anime where like like you have stuff in episodes that are completely disjointed from anything else that happens to the point where whatever happens in episode 4 is kind of irrelevant to what happens in episode 7. Like
Mm-hmm.
everything is relevant to something else, even if it didn't happen in the same timeline. He gets clues in each timeline he goes through that eventually leads him to the discovering who Yashiro really is. But and it also helps him to like, reach the ending that he wanted, which he wanted to save Kaio. He wanted to save the other girl. He wanted to save his friend. He wanted to save his mom, and like he gets to that point in that final timeline where he like they're all saved, and he still gets to like meet Irie. And I think what he really wanted to tell Irie at the end, even though he doesn't say it, is I think he really wanted to thank her for giving him like the courage and the resolve to get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
So, but
Yeah, to talk
I
about Irie just a little bit before we, completely wrap up with final thoughts. Did you like her whole backstory with her parents, like over like what was it, like a candy bar or something?
yeah, I
Like,
mean
what do you think
I
of that
feel like
story?
like I will admit that
Hmm.
the candy bar like thing, like that's a stupid reason
But I
to divorce
mean,
somebody over.
yeah, but like,
Uh,
it's
but
it's
I
it's
felt
kind
like
of a good
the
metaphor though
the
for like
yeah
it. A divorce can happen from one little thing, and like just not believing in somebody, like the power of like if you don't believe somebody, then
yeah. I
what
mean,
is
like
it?
yeah, it was like because I realized people who are just watching this casually are probably thinking, "Oh yeah, the candy bar is a really stupid reason to divorce somebody," and like that's just a stupid plot point. But when you really look into it in the context of the entire show, and you don't realize till the end of the show what the scene's really saying is like it's not the like how like like how like big the accusation was. It was the fact that like this person like whether they like this person the only thing holding them together was the fact that you believed in them,
Yep.
and that the trust issue was the bigger issue than the candy bar itself. Like it could have been like somebody accused you of like like flicking a rock at
Yeah.
somebody else while they weren't looking or something, and it wouldn't be that, oh, whether you did it or not. It would be that like like the other like the people that you want to believe you, and like
Yeah, the
that
the belief storyline, I think overall that was my when we talk about this the aspect of the show. I think that was a really powerful like story thread that really carried a lot of it. And another best moment to kind of tie into this was when her mom shows up and she kind of redeems herself by like letting her sneak out and taking her place in the bed. I think that was a great moment just because even that's the thing. The show does in just a few scenes, we get her backstory, very subtle backstory. Then we have her mom have this whole redemption just in one scene, and it's like you don't get that very often, like to actually have that type of character
yeah, because
development just in a few scenes. It's really impressive that they were able
because
to make
it was
you.
something that like like it was like a part of like every character's like arc throughout this whole show. Like Satoru's mom, like her whole thing, like her whole regret was like not believing her son when he
Mm-hmm.
said that June didn't do it. Her
Yep.
mom not believing, like Irie's mom not believing her husband on that candy bar incident.
Yep.
Like
Grandmother not believing in her daughter, like from getting abuse and taking care of her, like,
yeah, so and then
um,
like it goes into even like just believing in other people. Like Satoru like wanted to do everything by himself, and he like he needed like until Kenya was like, hey, I want to be a hero too. Like like can you believe in me? And then Kenya like when Satoru told him about like the kidnappings and the murders that are gonna happen, Kenya's like, it's not whether I believe what you're saying, it's whether I believe in you.
yeah.
Uh,
And that
and
all
I
pays off really nicely, in the final scene where he literally takes a leap of faith, trusting that his friends were there to
I
catching.
didn't even realize that like that context until you just said it. But yeah, like that leap of faith at the end is basically
Yeah,
a sum of
that's the
like
full resolution of that whole
yeah.
plot line. So I mean, it was just very nice. Much more like when I first watched the series, I nowhere near expected it to be as deep as it really is. It tackles a lot of really good themes, and you know, I don't know. Do you want to go into final thoughts here? Or do you have anything else to say in best moments or aspects? I mean,
Well,
obviously music was really good. There's some really good songs, catchy songs,
and
and
like yeah, I mean animation was about average for an
yeah,
anime.
no,
I'm like the anime did have some
but
really standout moments, but this
mhm,
anime wasn't really about
action or anything like that. Yeah,
action or anything. This was all about like really like just entirely plot driven. It involves like character drama. It has a like really intricate murder plot, like some cool time travel mechanics. Uh, so like honestly, like I think the animation like it was perfect for what the story was trying to tell. Like I felt like everything was like especially the subtle attention that it pays to not really the animation itself or to like the art, but to like the way scenes are laid out and like
the
how like
direction. Yeah, it's
yeah.
really nice.
So my overall final thought on this anime is this was one of the best anime I've ever seen. I I am literally pitting this in my. In fact, I'm gonna make a list of my top 10, and
Yeah,
that'll
I
like
think we should do like a podcast with that, like our maybe top 10 someday.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
I think if we both did our top 10, just like describe a little bit in each one, like
yeah, no
how it was.
spoilers, of course, on that
Yeah,
if we
just
did
but just
that.
overall. But like I will pit this. I don't know where it fits into my top 10, but I knew them like by the time I had finished that last episode that this anime is going to stick with me for a long time. It's like one of those animes like once you see it, it's like one of those anime that you have to compare every other anime to.
Yeah, I
Uh
mean that's really why I wanted to watch it, because we watched Charlotte, and just opening that idea of time travel, it really, made me reminisce on this show and how much I enjoyed the show years ago when I saw it, and this is the first time I rewatched it in several years, so it's pretty awesome.
this will be an anime that I definitely go back and watch
And
again. And I'm
I,
also
I
going
watched it in English this time too, and before I had
to
only seen it in Japanese. And I gotta say, just to briefly talk about the dub, really
the
nice
dub is
dub.
good. The
Yeah,
dub is good.
it was a really good dub, and I usually am not much of a dub guy, but I
Like
decided I was just gonna continue the series in dub from when I started it. So
well, yeah. So like my like that. Those are my final thoughts. My final. I have. I mean, I gave a little bit of criticism on some stupid decisions that Satoru made early on in the anime, but overall, that is not in any way, as shape or form, a detraction to this anime because like everything about this anime like folds out exactly the way the directors probably wanted it to. The anime had an excellent story, excellent characters, like deep like I'd say deep character motivations, like the complex I would say complex like psychologies like within like especially the main character and the main villain slash mentor. Uh the way this anime handles real world issues like bullying, like kidnapping and murder, the way it handles like stuff like isolation, domestic abuse, child abuse. This anime is like I I can't praise enough how great this anime is.
yeah,
So
I'm really glad I rewatched it. I mean, it's one of those shows, especially now. Like I said, it's been a few years. Just kind of just growing up a little bit more, just in those last few years since I've last seen it. I really is a different feeling. I think if you watch this, if you're younger, you might not fully feel the way we both do about it now. If you're just kind of like
I mean
a
honestly
teenager, you might not have the.
I think like I can see where you're coming from with that, but I think like because this anime, I think this anime kind of bridges a gap like
Mhm.
between generations and the
No,
fact
I
that
mean I still enjoyed it when I was younger too, but I'm just saying,
yeah.
like, there's certain appreciations for certain other aspects that you get kind of like
I
more
mean, I
connection.
think, yeah, I see what you're saying, and I think like a young anime would appreciate it for different reasons than I do,
Hmm.
but I think there's something here for everybody. I say like, I say that like, me, the guy saying that, there's like a different anime for every type of person. I think this is one of those animes that just appeals to like that could appeal to anybody across the spectrum.
Yeah,
Because
and
I'm a
I agree 100%. I mean, this anime obviously was so good. It got a live Netflix adaptation. Obviously, there's still interest in this. It does have that sequel manga I was talking about that with the side characters. That's kind of interesting a little bit. Overall, though, my thoughts about it, it's definitely one of my favorites. It's a great story, especially for 12 episodes. I mean, the amount of development of characters. My biggest thing, one of my favorite things is character development in general. I love seeing stories that have character development. And for this show to have so much character development in such a little period of time is actually astounding to me. Because, I mean, even long-standing animes like Naruto and stuff like that, there's a lot of character development, but I feel like there's more character development in this cast of characters than a lot of characters in shows like Dragon Ball that have gone on like so long, you know. Do you still? What is TN's motivation for anything? Like, like,
honestly, like I've already brought up my opinions about Dragon Ball.
well,
Like
we
in the
should
past,
definitely
but
do like a Dragon Ball, like over
I
like
mean, like
one day.
you
We'll
can
get
go
to
on my
those.
whole
We'll get to
thing.
that. We'll get to those. Yeah, we could do like the downfall of Dragon Ball. We'll do a
Yeah,
special
like
on that.
the
I
downfall
don't
of
know.
Dragon Ball started with the Buu saga. Some would argue it started with the Cell saga, but like I think that it was even redeemable. Like the Buu saga had no reason to exist. So
But yeah, I mean, overall, this amazing show. So I wanted to do the My Anime List review since I did want to kind of keep up with our list here. So we gave Charlotte an 8, and we kind of we kind of questioned why we gave Charlotte an 8 and what it would have to have done to made it a 10 or at least a 9. And I think having a good conclusion was one thing. So I mean,
yeah, I mean, I wanted more on what like the relationship between you and
because the thing with this one, I feel like I'm more satisfied with the ending of this than Charlotte.
I
Charlotte, I felt like there was so much more I wanted to see, and I think that's why I gave it an 8. This, I'm definitely leaning on a 9 or I'm leaning on a 9 or a 10.
If this doesn't get a 10, I don't know what anime would.
Yeah,
like I said,
well,
this is an anime that I'm going to be comparing every future anime I want to.
yeah. I mean, I want to give it to 10, but I don't want to like regret it later. I mean,
I won't regret this later. Like I had one thing to criticize about the anime, but I don't think that one thing I had to criticize about like some of Satoru's really stupid decisions early on.
yeah,
Overall, I thought that even with that, I didn't think it was like a stupid decision that was like inorganic to the character. I feel like it was just something where he just kind of like, because people in people in the real world, like you think in hindsight is 2020 and like, oh yeah, that makes plenty of sense now that I think about it now. But like we all make really stupid decisions and don't really think about it at the time. But like 5 minutes later, you're like, yeah, I should have done that differently. And I think that's how he was thinking in the show too. Like he was like in the moment,
yeah.
and for that reason, I can't really fault him for that. I literally cannot think of anything else about this show to criticize at all. I loved all the characters. I love the plot.
And I agree with you pretty much in everything you said. I mean, I think before I rewatched the series and having this conversation, I probably would have given it an easy 8 or a 9. But kind of just talking about it and just rewatching it here and just kind of really seeing the impact of this show, I think what really takes for us to give it a 10 is something that everyone who watches anime should watch, or not even just anime fans. I feel like this is a show that everyone should just check out.
Yeah.
You know. And I feel like because of that I strongly feel that it's that good that people should just check it out, like no matter what they're into. I think it's probably worthy of a 10, like you said.
So I mean, and for me, like giving it a 10 doesn't mean it's like the absolute like 100% perfect show or period. But for me, it does everything that it tried to do. Like
for a 12 episode anime.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like this anime, like I felt like the reason why it deserves a 10 is because like I cannot think of a single reason to give it anything less than a 10. That's basically it. Like my one little criticism of the show, and maybe there's other criticisms other people come up with, but I don't think any criticism anybody could come up with would be enough to detract from the fact that this show was just phenomenal.
Like you said, and perfection is not about, what's the saying go? Perfection's not like how much you can take away, but I don't.
Because you can find something to criticize literally about anything. So like for me, a 10 out of 10 is basically saying this anime is as good as it possibly could have been. I can't think. I mean, like you could say, oh yeah, it would have been better if the plot had this in it or something. I'm like, it would have been different, but wouldn't have necessarily been better.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other anime I can think of things that would have been better if they had, but I don't think anything this show lacked or that it had would have made it better or worse. I felt like this show found that perfect balance between telling a good story, um, like developing characters with a minimal amount of time, you know focusing on character relationships, intricate plot, like character motivations that make sense, like and then dealing with and the fact that it dealt with like so many real world issues, and it gave those real world issues care rather than over glancing them or using them as like a plot device or something. There was nothing in this show that I felt was used as a plot device. I felt like everything in this show, like everything in the plot was there because like the plot was like organic to the world and like the environment, characters and stuff like that. So it wasn't something that like I felt like, for instance, the child abuse or the domestic abuse. I don't feel like it was there just to make the character out to be a hero. I felt like it was there because that's what these characters were going through, and like showing how these characters dealt with that. So
Yeah, I
like
mean,
for me, I
overall,
cannot think of a
yeah.
reason to give this thing anything less than a 10.
I agree, and I think that's 10, definitely a fair score, and I think that's what we'll leave it at for now, and kind of go from there. So we've said so much. I mean, this has definitely been the longest one we've had so far. I could still talk. I could still talk about it a lot more.
Honestly,
I tried to.
Stuff I wanted to talk about because I realized that we're going to be going way over an hour with just stuff we're talking. We went for an hour and a half on this one.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some more stuff. I mean, like
maybe
we could talk about.
We should try to limit the amount of stuff we talk about.
No, I mean, it's good. I'm not too worried about the length. It's just I wanted to get through the categories and kind of keep it in theme. And it's just we have so few categories here. It's kind of hard to get through all of that sometimes.
I mean, like, it allows us to really just like overall talk a lot more because like this was a show that like I just love to talk about. Like I will say this much compared to that one show we covered in the first podcast. That one show we covered in the first podcast, I was like, what? If I talk about this show anymore, I'm just gonna like blow my lid. With this
these
show,
are stark differences between that show and this show. Like this is like what anime could be, and that other one's just kind of like what anime.
I feel like this is the type of anime like after you watch it, it's gonna make you really think about like a lot of like what anime could be, because this show shows that anime is more than just like a cartoon, just cartoons or whatever. This it's a new medium of telling a story that couldn't be told, I think, in any other way. So this show is pretty much art for me. Like it was like I said, in my top 10. I'm gonna go as far as say top 5. I don't know where to place it in my top 5 yet, but it's definitely up there. I won't forget about this anime for a long time.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to kind of. I agree with you 100%. I mean, it's an amazing show. I think we should probably wrap it up about here, though. Did you want to say what we're going to be covering next week? Because I have not seen what we're covering next week. So.
Well, next week we are covering like going from something like a race to like involved intricate plot and characters and like real world like issues. We're going from that to I think the logical next step. Harem anime. We're gonna be watching Oresuki.
So, and I've heard of it. I don't really know anything about it, so it should be interesting. And
oh yeah, it's gonna be interesting.
Yeah, and just for the future too, to people listening, if anyone has suggestions for other shows in the future for us to watch, any feedback is definitely appreciated. To kind of ideas or new shows. As you can tell from just the few episodes we've made already, we're kind of all over the place with the themes. We're not really sticking to one genre. We're just kind of going all over the place. So
I think that's what's great about it too. I mean, we will even watch a bad anime if
we already did.
Yeah, no guts left. So yeah, I mean, I do. I will watch a bad anime if it's bad, if it's so bad that it's at least interesting to talk about.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I plan to do some of the seasonal stuff coming up. So specifically that, if there's like a seasonal anime that you guys think we should cover, that would be appreciated. There's already a couple I'm looking at, but we might get kind of a schedule out and plan ahead for these episodes. That way, if people want to watch ahead. But
I mean, I think especially once I get into a more regular schedule, probably by the end of next month, we can start maybe doing more than one a week.
Yeah, we definitely have a lot of plans just for the show and the podcast in general. But I think right here we'll kind of wrap it up. So thanks to everyone who is listening. We'll be back next Wednesday with Orisuki. Yeah.
Yes.
Orisuki. So
which I will say this much about Orisuki. There is no English dub, so we will both be watching it in, Japanese with subs.
Okay, well there you go. So if you hate dub, then I guess you can skip next week or just listen to our thoughts about it.
Yeah.
But all right, see you guys.
Say it.